Thanks to all my supporters, links are down below in the description if you want to help out the channel. Hey guys, welcome to another VFX compositing tutorial. Now today we're going to tackle probably the most widely used VFX shot of all time, and that is a gunshot. Now if you want to work along with us, everything I use is down in the description below, so make sure to go check those out. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, I'm going to be using After Effects today just because that's going to be the easiest to do some gun muzzle flashes, but you can apply the same stuff to other programs if you want. So I'm just going to create a new project like this. Let's go ahead and drag and drop in our footage. So if you downloaded everything in the description below, you can just select everything at once. So I'm going to select the muzzle, this video clip, and then we need to also select the gun smoke. So with those selected, we can just drag those into our project. And there is one more thing that we need, so let's right click, import file, and then you need to locate this little image sequence. Now this is actually a free image sequence off of Action VFX, so make sure to go check that out in the description. Once you have this, you can just click the first one. You want to make sure this OpenXR sequence is checked down here, and then we can go ahead and import that in. Okay, so now we have all of our stuff in our scene. Let's go ahead and take this footage and drag that down and make a new composition. Now first thing that I like to do is actually mark where our muzzle flash is going to be. So let's just zoom in here to the gun, and the gun we shot actually had a blowback feature, so we're not going to do the slide in this tutorial. But let's just come here. Here is the first one. So once you have it where the muzzle flash is going to be, you just come down here, click this marker button, and then let's do those for the other two. Okay, so just like that, we have our three marks like that, and that's just going to help us time out some things. Okay, so we're going to do one muzzle flash first, and then we can copy that over to the other ones. So let's just go ahead and push our work area in by clicking and dragging these little corner pieces right here. Now to get started, let's go ahead and drag in our muzzle JPEG, put that on top of our footage. Okay, so now you can see that we have our muzzle flash in with a black background. Now to actually get rid of that black, we can come down here to this mode, and if we set the mode instead of normal to screen, that'll key out the black. Now if you don't see that for any reason, just hit this little button down here and it should pop up. Okay, so now let's rotate this. So I'm just going to open up this menu and then open up this transform, and then let's just rotate this about right there. We do need to come to our first marker so we know what we're working with. Now let's just drag it up here, and that's looking pretty good. Maybe need to rotate it a little bit more, something like that. And we actually do need to scale this down a little bit, so let's just scale it down to something like there. I like to keep it around 2 times the length of the gun. So for pistols, it's going to be 2 times this length, so that is about this. Okay, so now that we positioned it correctly and rotated it, that is looking pretty good. However, it is going through our whole clip, and so we only want it to be on 1 or 2 frames. So let's just drag this down right there, and then the other one down all the way there. And so now let's just give this a play to see what we got. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and mute my clip just so we don't have to deal with that. So that is looking pretty good. However, there is a lot more stuff that we can do to make this look a little bit more realistic. And the first thing that we need to do is add some gun smoke. So over here we have smoke for gun effects. We're just going to drag that. I'm going to do it below our muzzle flash. And again, this has a black screen. But before we actually key it out, since the smoke is so hard to tell, I'm going to go ahead and just come over here and change the opacity down just a tad, like this. And now we need to locate which smoke effect we want. So if I scrub over, I like this one right here. You can see it's basically just a side view of some gun smoke. So let's get the first frame. So right here, we can just zoom out a little bit, and then we can click and drag over here and make that our first frame. Then we just need to zoom in and select our ending keyframe. So whenever the next smoke effect happens. So right there, you can see that this is the start of the next one. So we're just going to come over here and then bring the end of the clip to that little keyframe. Now you can of course select whichever one you want. However, this is the one that always works for me. Now I will mention that these are for non-commercial use only. You might actually want to buy some of these assets if you're using them in film. Okay, with that out of the way, we do need to position this again. We can see that the smoke emanates from here and then goes out like that. So let's find that first little fireball right here, and then let's just position that where our gun is going to be. So something like that. We also do need to scale it down, something like that. We can see later. Okay, so now we actually do need to move this over so it's in line with our muzzle flash. And so that is looking pretty cool. And it is very big right now, and that's actually very realistic. The smoke of a gunshot is very large. I know in Hollywood a lot of films get it wrong, how they have like a tiny little muzzle flash and a little bit of smoke. So these are about the right sizes. Make sure to do your research if you are interested in. Okay, so now with that out of the way, we can go ahead and set the opacity back up. And like the other clip, we can just set, instead of normal, to screen right here. And now let's just give this a play. So now that is looking a lot better. We can see that we have the muzzle flash, but also the smoke right here. Now you can of course play around with it. Say the smoke doesn't come out as fast as you want it. I usually just cut off a frame or two. So you can see that the gases should be somewhere out here right now, since the muzzle flash is out here. However, if we go to the next frame, they're only right here. So what I'm going to do is going to set this back a frame or two. So let's try it there. Yeah, so now you can see that the smoke is actually going with the muzzle flash, and that's more correct. Okay, so one thing I want to do before we move on is to add a little bit of motion blur to this little image right here. Now you'll see that this barrel and everything else behind it is a little blurred out, and that's actually because of the motion blur and also the depth of field. So to fake this, like we actually shot this on the day, we're going to come up here and make sure that you have the muzzle flash selected instead of your smoke. And then effect, we're going to go to blur and sharpen, and then come down here to directional blur. And now if we just move this to 90 degrees, and then increase the blur length, we can actually fake some motion blur. So that is a little too much, so let's just get this down, something like that. So here it is before, and here it is after. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is mess around with some of this smoke, just because it's not that much. So what I'm going to do is come down to the smoke, where I'm going to add a new effect. I'm going to go to color correction, and then brightness, contrast, like that. I'm just going to increase the brightness. Let's see if that did anything. Maybe decrease the contrast a little bit, just so it's a little bit more noticeable. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. We can see the smoke more. So here it was before, and then after, it just brings it out a little bit. You will see that when the smoke actually pops out, we get kind of a popping effect, just because it's not totally keyed out 100%. So what we can go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and come over here, go to transform opacity. I'm going to hit this little clock feature, and that will allow us to keyframe some stuff. So I'm going to set it to 0 here. And then we know here we want it to be 100%. So that will just kind of ease that transition in a little bit. And so let's copy that 100% and then paste this about right here, I would say. And then at the very end, when it pops out, we want this to be 0. Again, just so it kind of fades out instead of pops. Okay, so let's check what we have done so far. We've added the muzzle flash and then the smoke, and then we messed around with some of those just to make it blend into our scene a little bit better. The final thing that we have to do is actually add the casing flying out of the gun. And so that is pretty easy as well. We just need to come over here, and this OpenEXR file over here, we can just drag that down right there. And all this is just a spinning bullet casing like that. So we just need to position this. First of all, just start over here so it starts on our first frame. And I know the casing is going to eject somewhere from around here. So first of all, let's just scale this down. And then we can also position it wherever we want it to be. So I know I want it to be kind of up here a little bit. I think it's also still a little too large. So we'll try at 12. That's looking pretty good. And now we also need to rotate it. So let's rotate that until it's facing the correct way, like that. And then let's just position it again somewhere around there. That is looking pretty good. Now to actually get it to fly out of the gun, I'm just going to animate it a little bit. So animate the position. So that is where it's going to start. And then I know somewhere like right here, I want it to fly out of the gun. So I'm just going to position it, let's say, like right there. And then I know I want it to fall over down somewhere over there. So I'm just going to come over here and then position it where I want it to fall, like that. Okay, so now we can see that we have this little animation. However, that looks very fake just because it's very jagged right now. So to actually change that, we're just going to select all these little keyframes at the bottom, right click, and then we're going to go to Keyframe Interpolation. We're going to set the spatial interpolation instead of linear. We're going to do continuous Bezier. Like that, and now you can see that it's actually formed some curves. However, our curves are kind of weird right now, so we need to play around with some of those. So let's do that one like that, and these actually need to be flat. So that is looking good. I can actually go ahead and select this middle one and just we're just going to move it over here. Yeah, So something like that, you can just play around with it and see which result that you get. Now we do want this to kind of mimic real life as much as possible. So we do want to make sure that gravity kind of works how it's intended. So basically how I found to mimic that is the time it takes to get up to the peak, the same exact time it should take to fall about right here. So if I actually continue, so if we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames, at 6 frames it's up here. So 6 frames after this frame, it needs to be at the same position. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can see that it needs to be at this position, however it's fallen down here. And so what we can do to actually change that is remain on this frame. We're going to select the final keyframe, and we're just going to move that forward until we get that position that we like. So now let's increase this work area, and let's just see what that looks like. Okay, so now you can see that it is falling according to gravity and everything. Now I do need to play around with some of the timings a little bit, so let's just make this a little bit faster. Yeah, like that. And then again, we just need to do that same thing for the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right there. We just need it to be about right there. Okay, so now that we have that done, we can see that the bullet kind of just stays here, and it's supposed to be kind of in these bushes and stuff back here. So first thing we need to do is actually end the little animation right at that last frame right there. So now it just disappears, but to hide that disappearing, what I'm gonna do is come over here, and we're gonna mess around with the scale. So I know that I want the scale to be 12% at the start, and then at the very end, since it's flying backwards in space, we can decrease that scale. So I'm gonna make it something like 7, but play around with yours. Okay, so that is all looking good. However, it does look a little bit fake right now. Number one thing is that it's actually going over his hand. If I kind of go over here, you can see it's going over his hands. So I need to correct that. And also, it's a little too clear. So like before, we need to add some motion blur. But instead of using that method of motion blur we used before, we can actually toggle the switches and modes down here. And if you come up here, you'll see we have a little motion blur tick right here. So if we check mark that for this little thing, we should see that we now have some motion blur. So let's play that just to see what that looks like. So yeah, now you can see that that is looking a lot better. Now I am having this issue right here. So what I found to fix that is to actually just move the first keyframe of our position just over 1. And then that will basically add a little bit of motion blur at the start. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so that is the first problem solved. However, we still have the issue of it going over his arm. So to actually solve that, we need to do a mask. However, if we put a mask on this layer, it'll actually move the mask and it'll be hard to track and everything. Let me just demonstrate that. So if I kind of do a rough thing of his arm, let's say I actually put time into that. If I move over a frame, it actually follows the bullet. So that is just very annoying. You'll have to edit it per frame even though his arms are staying stationary. So that's just not a good method of using. I'm just going to delete that mask real quick. Now a better method is to actually go ahead and add a new solid. I just right clicked for that. It doesn't matter what color since we're not really going to see it. Now let's come over here to transform. I'm going to put the opacity down just so I can see his arm. And now let's make a mask on this solid layer. So I'm just going to click and drag again with the pen tool selected up here. And this one I'm actually going to kind of spend some time on. Okay, so now that we have this mask, we have this result. We need to go back down here, set the opacity back up to 100. And then we can uncheck this little eye tool. We can go ahead and come back here to toggle and switches. And then for this track matte, we can actually set this to be the alpha inverted matte. And now we will see that the bullet, once it passes through his arm, it's no longer seen. And then you can see down here that the little mask is working. It's basically masking out his arm using this little layer right here. Okay, so let's see what we're working with again. So we have everything now. We have the muzzle flash, the smoke, and the bullet coming out. However, there is one last thing that will make this shot a lot better. So let's go ahead and come down here and duplicate this little movie clip layer. And basically what we need to do is add some fake light in our scene. If you shoot a real gun, then the light of the muzzle flash will actually illuminate the ground, some of the stuff around you, including your hand, the gun itself, your face and everything. So we need to mimic that. So let's come to the frame that our muzzle flash is going to be. And I'm just going to add some mask to this frame. So I'm basically just trying to think about in real life, where would the light actually wrap around? So for example, it'll probably wrap around his hands and the gun since it's right next to the muzzle flash. However, some other places it might illuminate his hat region. So let's do this over here, and maybe a little bit of his face as well. Now you don't have to be too accurate to this since we're going to feather this a lot. And so coming down here, I notice it will probably also affect his clothing right here, just because that is in view of himself. You kind of just have to play around with it and kind of just think about where the light would be in real life. And then finally, I just like to add a little bit of a circle around the muzzle flash. Now if he was shooting against a wall or anything, I would add some thing on the wall, but since he's basically just shooting in broad daylight, I'm not going to affect any of this stuff, since in real life it's going to be so unnoticeable. Okay, so with all of that, we can actually come down here and set this, instead of normal, we want to do add. And so that basically just brightens up this little layer. And since we have the mask, it is only affecting the mask spot. Let's go ahead and come over here and make this to be only the one frame that it's supposed to be on. So just bring these edges over here. I might actually try to do 2 frames like that. We'll see. But now it's looking kind of fake. We can actually come down here to the mask section and affect the different masks individually. So the big flash over here, I know I wanted it to be super feathered. So let's just increase that. And then you can also come down here and decrease the mask opacity as well. So next, the little hand and gun, I'm going to add some feather like that. And then that is way too bright. I'm just going to decrease that till we get something like that. And then again with the other ones as well, let's try his face. It's pretty simple. Just going to feather it until you get something that you like, and then the opacity down until you get something like that. Okay, so with all my masks adjusted now, let's take a look at what we did. So if I turn this layer on and off, you'll see that it basically just adds some glow around the parts that the muzzle flash would actually light up. And so now if we take a look at this shot, we can see whenever we shoot it, we have a little bit of flash on his face and everything. I might actually go ahead and adjust some of the opacity, specifically on his face right now. It's looking a little too much. So that's the green mask. So I'm just gonna make the opacity down, say right around there. Now let's take a look. Yeah, so that is about it. That was just one muzzle flash. The first time it's going to take a long time depending how detailed you want it. But the next times you can actually copy and paste most of this stuff. Okay, so now moving on to the other shots. What we can do is go ahead and pre-compose this, since I don't like working in a lot of layers. So I'm just going to first name this. So we need to name this shot 2, since this is going to be our pre-composition. So I'm just going to select everything right here, right click, pre-compose, and then I can name this one shot 1. So now we have shot 2 has shot 1 in it, whereas shot 1 is the original. So to do shot 2, I'm just going to come up here and kind of copy everything besides the base clip. Now let's go back to shot 2. Just going to paste that in and come over here. And since we have pasted everything in, we can kind of just move that all the way to where our next shot is going to be. So if we zoom in, we have the muzzle flash. This is this purple one, and that happens on the exact frame that we need it to. So that looks pretty good. We can see since he didn't really move that much, actually everything pretty much lines up, so we don't really need to do much with this, I don't think. So that is looking good. That is shot 2 done. We got super lucky with that. However, let's do shot 3 now, where we actually will have to change around some stuff. So with shot 2, we're just gonna right click, we're gonna pre-compose shot 3. Okay, so we actually need to rename some stuff. So here is shot 1, this is the original. And we have shot 2, which is actually going to be our shot 3. And so what we need to do is we're just going to come up here, enter. I'm just going to change this to shot 3, and then change shot 3 to shot 2. There we go. I know it's very confusing, but you'll get the hang of it. So we can see that our first shot is the original. Our second shot has the original clip plus the new shot. And shot 3 is going to be our next shot. So again, let's just copy paste that in. And then move these clips all the way over to our next marker. So now if I come zoom in here, we will see that he has moved the gun this time. So nothing lines up. So we need to go ahead and reposition some of the stuff. So first of all, let's just work like we worked before. We're going to do the muzzle flash. So here is the muzzle flash right there. I'm just going to come down to transform and then do our position right there, and then I need to come over here and do the rotation as well. Okay, with that rotated, we can now do the smoke as well. So again, just come over here, transform. Again, it might be easier if you want to do instead of screen, setting it to normal, just so you can rotate that a bit. And then let's set this back to screen. Let's just give that a look. Yeah, so that looks pretty good. Next thing we need to do, we have a little ghost thing right here, and that's actually because we have our little flash thing happening at the wrong moment. You can see that this edge is supposed to be lined up with this edge since they're the same movie clip. So what we need to do is just grab this, just going to bring this over there so that these two edges line up. And now we need to mess around with our mask again. So let's double click this one. Just gonna move this mask to be where it was before, like that. And then if I come over here, mask section, we can go to this mask, double click to select that. I'm basically just positioning them where they are now. Now that he's moved, everything is kind of misaligned, so we just need to realign everything. Now once you have that, you're pretty much done. You might want to mess around with the bullet casing. So to do that, we're going to come up to the brass again. We can just come down here, go to transform. Instead of moving around the position, since we already have a pretty good keyframe set, what we can actually do is come down to the anchor point and mess around with the anchor point. So I'm just gonna mess around with that. Let's go to the start and see where it comes out of the gun. Yeah, so around there is looking pretty good. You can see it comes out of the gun right there, so that's what we want. And since we mess around with the anchor point instead of the position, the same animation is still applied, so that is pretty good. Might also need to mess around with this mask, so let's unhide that, and then I'm just gonna position this mask so that is looking pretty good. And now we can rehide that. And now if we look at the brass, yeah, it should go behind the arm again, so that is looking good. And that is actually the third shot finished. Okay guys, so that is going to do it for this tutorial. Hopefully you guys learned a thing or two about gun VFX and can apply this to your own filmmaking skills. But anyways guys, we have a Patreon and Discord. Links to those are in the description below. But anyways guys, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Peace.